Welcome back to the Ron and Randy's Audio Hour. My name is Ron, and I have my good friend hanging out with us today. His name is Randy. And on this episode, we're going to be talking to you about streamers and all things digital. What do we do when it comes to streamers, and how do you tackle that monkey of streaming when it comes to high fidelity playback? So that's what we're going to be discussing. This podcast is available on all of the major platforms. You can click on the links down below to find those platforms, which includes Spotify, Google Music, Apple Music, the whole shebang.
Yeah. Let me know when we're recording.
We're recording, buddy. We're doing this.
All right. So give me like a 3 count and just let me know. And then just say live.
Live. We're doing it live, Randy.
All right. So we're recording.
We are.
That's a joke. It's from Ron Burgundy.
It's so.
He's like, I don't. Right. No, we're live now, and Ron goes, I don't believe you.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
That was a long way to go for a bad joke.
It was. That's okay. I'm not as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as you are, because I haven't had my cold coffee yet, or my lukewarm coffee.
God, I've had like a pot by now.
Randy's been under the weather, and he's finally feeling better, so I'm happy to hear that. I'm glad you're doing better, buddy.
Thank you. I'm about 90, 91%, 90, 92.
What do you have? Why don't we
89.
let our friend... Well, I'll take 89. That's good.
Right. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's a B+.
Yeah. Why don't we let our friends know what we're doing this week?
You froze on me.
Did I really?
Yeah, it's probably me. It's probably my stupidity on my end.
Yeah, you're fine on my end. What is new in your audio world this week? What are you working on?
Well, Orchard Audio pecan pie review literally just went up like 20 minutes ago. That means nothing when you're watching this now, because it will be like 2 days from now. But it went up on Monday. Yeah. Okay. And it's a fine device, and you'll have to watch the video if you haven't watched it. Spoiler alert, it's awesome.
What is the pecan pie? What is this thing?
It's a little black box, and on the front you have some beautiful artwork.
Can you bring that back into frame real quick? I want to see that thing real quick. So I'm going to solo you for a minute here.
Yeah, there solo me for a minute.
So that front dial is a volume control, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's on the side of it?
The amount of electrical shock that the person you have hooked up to it, just like Ghostbusters, the first scene. Yeah. Okay. No, it's a volume. It's a quite nice volume. Probably the best knurled knob I've ever felt. Probably the smoothest volume pot I've ever felt. It's in a little box here. We got some ventilation on the back, 2 balanced outputs. Okay. Don't dismay if you don't have RCA, because it comes with one of these. And then it's got the regular Pi inputs here on the side, Ethernet, and then 4 USB. 4 USBs.
Thank you for doing that. What are the USB? What is the USB for? And does it have to be wired to stream, or is it a wireless streamer?
Okay, so that's a good point. So this one does have to be wired Ethernet to stream, but there's a way around that. Most Raspberry Pis will include Wi-Fi and Apple AirPlay or AirPlay. Okay, this one, however, only does wired because it affects the sound quality.
Oh,
yeah. You can get around that, though, but you can buy a little device, which I bought. It basically grabs your Wi-Fi signal, and then it gives you an Ethernet out of it. So it has more to do with noise issues with operating a Wi-Fi receiver in or on the Raspberry Pi itself.
So I think this is going to be the first talking point. Now, I have a question for you. Did you find out from the manufacturer that wired is superior to wireless? Like, is that something that the manufacturer told you? Like, this is the reason that we did it, or how did you
Yeah.
find that out?
Well, so I have a Pi and I built it, I don't know, over a year ago. Well, I didn't build it. I just assembled it. So I have one and it has Wi-Fi and some wireless capabilities of it. So my question to him was, okay, so this has to be wired, and then kind of take me through that. And he basically said, it has to do with sound quality.
Okay.
And that I think it's noise and it's just stuff going on inside. So, and that is, I'm telling you, man, this thing is clean. And
Okay.
just, it's an incredible device. It really is. And I wasn't sold. Like I literally had to email him. I'm like, take me through the value prop on this because I just don't get it.
Remind me again how much it is, Randy?
It's $550, but he did also give, which I need to change on the description. He also gave out a discount code.
Oh,
for 5% off.
Okay.
So it's $550, and I was thinking about this in terms of, okay, $550 compared to a Raspberry Pi, and then plus you have to put a hi-fi hat on it to get a better digital signal. So you're looking at maybe $200 there, maybe $150, and then you have to buy a DAC on top of that. So even if you buy a $100 DAC, then you're at $250, $300. Okay. But this thing also can act as a headphone amplifier. And it also has its own internal DAC. And it's not just some DAC chip. He made the DAC. And it's based off of two Burr Brown, like the premium, the top tier Burr Brown chips.
Okay.
And so once he started talking to me about, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure that even if we need to pin this and come back to it, I want to talk about it being a headphone amp. Like how I didn't see any headphone input. So how does that work?
All right. So what you do is this is an RCA, and then on the back it's a 3.5 millimeter jack.
Okay.
So it also acts as a preamp. So the volume on the front controls volume. So there's the headphone amp. You can also run it balanced as well, and you have to get a different cord on it to run it balanced. So you have a headphone amp, you have your Raspberry Pi streamer, and you have a DAC. Okay, so there's the value. And you would probably understand this more than I do. But if you start to dig into the specs, there's like 135 dB of dynamic range.
Yeah.
Like 120 dB signal to noise ratio.
For the noise floor. Yeah.
These are specifications that rival or usurp specs on much more expensive products.
When we start talking about things like, and you're super smart about this stuff, like codecs and things like that, is there anything that we would need to know about that streamer related to codecs? Is there anything interesting that we should be aware of?
No, codecs come into play with Bluetooth.
Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a codec is basically how the information is packaged on one end and unpackaged on the other.
I see. So with this being wired, it negates having that conversation. Okay.
No, the only thing you have to start worrying about with streaming is what type of file type is the music stored in. Now, if you're streaming, then it's whatever, the streaming service, whether it be Tidal, Qobuz, or what have you. But if you're using like your network attached storage device, the bottom line is that's actually handled through the operating system, which is Volumio. And that's another conversation you have to have on top of it, because the Pecan Pi is just the hardware.
Okay.
They will add on the operating system of your choice, and it's either Volumio or Rune, I believe. So Volumio is another conversation that you have to have all together, because that's the interface, that's the UI that you are utilizing to get the music. And that UI is on the Raspberry Pi, which is part of the hardware. So you have the software and the hardware.
Okay.
Just kind of like your computer.
Okay. Yeah, the rune thing would be of interest to me. That's how I would certainly use it, no doubt about that. And I want to make sure that I fully understand this. So we have balanced output,
Yep.
hence we have a built-in DAC, so it does all the decoding that you would need inside the unit, and then you have an
Yeah.
analog out via XLR. Um, can you? And I'm sorry if I missed this when you were explaining this. Can you run from the USB into an external DAC if you want to bypass the DAC inside of that unit? Can you do that?
Maybe, but you wouldn't want to.
Okay.
There,
Because you
I'll just put it to you this way: this is the best DAC I've ever heard.
okay. Right. Well, I was just thinking like if I wanted to run that into like a May DAC or one of these highfalutin holo audio R2R DACs just to see what would happen, you know. I was curious. I was curious if somebody has the ability to run it into an external DAC if they wanted to.
I'd have to check on that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Because the way that he's got this put together, I think you would be able to if you got into it and because the DAC that's in there is a hat, and those has I don't know 17 pins or whatever, and it actually mates up to the Raspberry Pi. So you would have to separate that out, and then you probably would have all the functionality of a regular Raspberry Pi.
Okay.
But his whole deal is that he builds an amazing DAC, and he also he sells the DAC hats by themselves. So if you have an existing Raspberry Pi, you can add that on to your DAC.
Okay.
Or your
that makes
Raspberry
sense.
Pi, excuse me.
And okay. Dude, that's awesome. So what have you so you've been using these adapters to go single-ended because you don't have any kind of balanced inputs on a preamp or amplifier,
No.
I assume. Is that why?
No, I have a balanced my Anthem integrated 225 is balanced, as well as I have a balanced crown that I can run into it. So I ran it both ways.
Okay. Did you notice any big changes?
I didn't particularly, except I mean you get twice the output voltage, so if you're running single-ended, you get 2.5 volts at 100%. If you're running balanced, you get 5 volts. So yeah, I mean, but from a music standpoint, I didn't really notice a huge of a difference, but it's hard to determine that because I didn't switch. I didn't go balanced into the integrate or the Anthem and then go single-ended into the Anthem. So I didn't go back and forth on those.
I see. Now you've done quite a bit of streaming, and you stream often, right? That's like your primary way to listen to music for the most part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And you feel so far in your journey that this is probably the best sounding streamer that you've messed around with?
Yeah, bar none.
Okay.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
What did you notice that you could sink your teeth into in terms of why is it better sounding than some of the what is it that you're this is doing something that I really dig?
Well, from a sound perspective, it had mostly to do with none of the highs felt overtly analytical, or none of the highs felt like you get a little thing on your face. Oh, there it went away. None of it was digitally, and that's what I like to call it. It didn't sound digitally or harsh or shiny or metallic or scalpely. All right.
Yeah.
So then the lows also felt full without being colored. The mids had body. The biggest difference that I started hearing was the separation of instruments and the separation of harmonies. So oftentimes when I listen to a song, I hear a harmony and I know in my brain this is two people singing. But it wasn't until this and some of the other stuff that I was I could definitively hear two different voices, and then the sum of their voices coming out together.
Interesting.
And then we have to start to get into soundstage and the depth and the openness of the music. And that's the biggest difference that I heard. And it wasn't to the point where I'm like, I'm just concentrating on one area of the music, trying to hear a difference. It was, I just heard it like out of the box. A similar experience for me from running like out of my phone into my headphones and then out of my phone into a DAC and into my headphones. I'm just like, okay. There's a difference. And if you're just like, if you're not concentrating, you may miss it, but every amp that I hooked it up to had a similar experience, albeit maybe not as pronounced, but every amp that I I'll put it this way, every amp that I hooked this up to benefited from it.
Interesting. And specifically benefited to some of this like layering or separation of instruments and things like that. Like that's the big takeaway, is that you're hearing that whenever you're using the streamer.
And I haven't had that experience on other DACs before. Like I'll be able to tell a difference with DACs. And frankly, I was never one like, I never put a whole lot of like importance or emphasis on the DAC prior to this. I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, this one sounds a little, I don't know, I wouldn't say harsh, but this one sounds, more analytical. This one sounds warmer. Like if I'm looking at the E30 by Topping versus the iFi Zen DAC, the iFi Zen DAC to me sounds richer and more analog. The E30 can sound a bit analytical, overtly analytical. So it was a different experience to where I'm just like, okay, these DACs, they can not only change the way the music sounds, but they can change the way the music is presented.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So now we go from pure music differences to now we're going to music differences as well as experience differences with the soundstage and the layering and the depth. So all of it's intangible, right? But once you start to get into the size, the depth, the imaging, all that stuff, then you really start to get, into the esoteric nature of this hobby. Yeah. And that was where, number one, it sounded better right out of the gate. But number two, it sounded deeper and broader.
Yeah, man.
Does that make sense?
Dude, it does. You're getting me all warm and fuzzy talking about it, because what you're describing is the kind of stuff that Ron is after, is when I start hearing that clear separation between instruments. And this is something that is, it's usually emphasized in speaker placement, right? Like, so when I'm pulling speakers out into the room and I'm doing my thing, that's the direction that I'm going in, is I want to hear that clear separation of harmonies versus main vocals with, who's playing guitar, where the drummer is. And it's always interesting when you land on a piece that like inherently does that right out of the gate. Right. Because I have found that you're able to construct this from a multitude of components, like a lot of different, let's get some tubes in the mix. Let's work on speaker placement. Let's do this. Let's do that. And then the sum of that is, wow, I have this, clear separation. And so it gets me excited, Randy, when you talk about one component that right out of the gate, you are noticing that separation, because knowing you for as long as I have known you, and we talk almost every single day, if not every day, you've never talked about one component like the way you're talking about this component. And I don't know if you realize that, but this is the first time where you're saying, I'm hearing some separation between some stuff, and that's exciting, dude.
Well, I think the Vista Audio Spark was the closest thing. And then also the Rysong A10 tube amp, both of which I felt like provided that. Now, so here's where it gets real interesting.
Yeah.
So when you mate up the Pecan Pie to the Vista Audio Spark,
I wanted to ask.
Now it's even bigger and better. And the tube amp. So what I'm hearing can only be I don't know, improved upon with the right electronics
Yeah.
in the
It's
chain.
emphasizing this starting point.
It's becoming even more apparent. And on my birthday, when I was listening for pleasure, it was through the Compi by Orchard Audio and the Vista Audio Spark, and through the
Which
speakers
speakers?
they shall remain unnamed. We still in a gag order with it, but that was a system that I gleaned the greatest amount of musical joy that I've ever experienced. And that made me happy because all of those components fall right in the wheelhouse of my channel, which is great experience at not a lot of money. They're all a bit. One of them comes from a pretty widely known company, but the other two come from a company that are smaller and
kind of boutique.
are really concentrating on that component specifically. And I think that's where, when we start peeling back the onion for affordable gear, I think those are the companies that are going to be able to provide that level of experience at that price range. Now, they all are going to have some quirks. The quirk on the pecan pie has nothing to do with the hardware and everything to do with the software that it's running. So that is the chink in the armor is Volumio.
I see.
The chink in the armor with Vista Audio, and I don't really feel like it's a chink, with the Spark is 20 watts per channel. So I don't have a problem with either of those. Some people may. I would argue that if you just give it a chance, that all of those, like, I don't know, issues that someone may have with
Concerns,
it are going to go away as soon as you start to hear it. You're like, okay, I get it. This is worth it to get over some of these quirks or perceived quirks.
Do you have other dedicated streamers that you have in house that you have put that thing up against?
Yeah. So I have Hios, and that's internal to my Marantz. I have Playfi, that's internal to the SVS sound base. I have an Arylic A50, which is very similar to the Hios platform and the Playfi platform. And then I also have the Blue Sound Node 2i, which is their own platform. So anything outside of Blue Sound and probably Sonos is all going to look and feel very similar, because I feel like, even though it may be packaged and named a different thing, it's all built on the same platform. And so it has a very similar user experience. Blue Sound Node 2i is a different animal, and it's
okay.
I don't want to give it away, but there's a big difference with the Blue Sound over some of the other streamers.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry, my phone's blowing up.
It's okay, dude. No, mine was too, so I turned it upside down so it stopped distracting me. It's always funny how that happens. Okay, so how much is the Blue Sound? What is the price tag on that guy?
So it's $550. The same.
Oh, okay. Oh.
But the thing about the stream, so when you have a device like the Blue Sound or the Pecan Pie or whatever, it's a sum of its parts, and the streamer is only one of its parts, right?
I see what you're saying.
So you have the streamer, and then you have the DAC. And so some streamers, you can bypass the internal DAC and run digitally out into another device. So if you have a DAC that you really love, you don't have to use the internal DAC. You just digital out of that. And so now you've taken the DAC out of the chain.
Yeah.
All the streamers that I've dealt with have their own DAC, whether it be internal to the SVS sound base, internal to the Marantz, internal to the Arylic. They all have that, right? Some, but not all, will allow you to digital out.
Okay.
Does that
Now,
make
when
sense?
it totally makes sense. Yeah. This is such an interesting conversation. I did a Zoom meeting yesterday for my patrons, and we were talking about digital and streaming and all this kind of stuff. And excuse me one second here. Sorry, I thought I was going to burp, and that would not be the kind
I
thing
just
to
let
do.
it rip. That's what I do on my channel.
Let it go. And it was interesting to hear from the perspective. I think I had like 15 guys in there, and all different walks of, their audiophile journey. And, I have some guys in there that have really crazy systems, and by crazy, I mean very expensive systems. And it was kind of interesting to hear the different perspective on streaming and what, everybody has noticed. And man, when you start talking about that pecan pie, that would be a piece that I would be interested in putting against the original source, and seeing how big of a difference is there. Because I know that whenever I've tried streaming services through Rune, which is going through my Inuos Zenith. So let me just stack up the dollars and cents so everybody understands in context where I'm coming from. That thing's like $5,000. It's a computer that runs Rune, and that's all it does. It's like it's got a USB port, and you plug that then into your DAC. So you're not done. You're not ready to listen to music yet. You got to plug that into a DAC. And when I was doing some things that we're going to talk about in a second, I was running it into the May DAC, which is my favorite DAC that I've ever spent time with. And that's ironically another $5,000, $10,000 for just those two pieces, which is staggering and insane. Randy, when I started doing direct comparisons of the music that I was streaming through Rune, so I have a Tidal account, I have a Qobuz account, everything is maxed out in terms of the highest resolution streaming that I can get. When I actually sat down and I did like for like comparisons of a CD that I ripped onto my Zenith, because it's got you just can rip CDs right into it, I preferred the CDs. And I'm just sitting here like thinking this through of, even if this little pecan pie is doing some magical things with streaming, which is very encouraging and interesting to me, I would be so curious as to what your experience would be if you then compared it to just the CD or whatever the like for like scenario is that you're listening to. And if you are getting some clear separation from that pecan pie, what does that separation then look like if we go to the original source? I wonder if it would be different or if you would even notice.
Well, I think so. There's a ton of variability in that.
Yeah.
Okay. So even when you're using the same, so the only way that I'd be able to do that is if I had two pecan pies. I had one going into one analog, one going into the other analog. And then I was streaming Tidal on one, and then I was pulling my network attached storage device where all my CDs are ripped on the other one. Okay. So at that point, you're sharing the same DAC. But within that, there's inherent variability with the same DAC, even if they don't intend to, even if it measures the same, you still have different parts. They may be the same part, but if it's a different manufacturing, different batch, different whatever it is. Okay, so obviously tons of variability there.
Yeah.
Then you have to start to take into consideration, how was that CD ripped to my NAS? Yeah. How was it done? Because even though if it's in software, it's still going to be in FLAC format. Okay, so FLAC is FLAC is FLAC is FLAC. But so there's so many steps in the process to get it from here to there. Okay. Yeah. I think that may be the best way to compare it to, because then you have similarly spec'd or the same spec'd power supplies. You have the same DAC. So now the only variability in there is one's coming from Tidal and one is coming from your CD. But even at that point, you still have variability, because what Tidal is doing with that software, what your Ripper did with its software and how it put it on your NAS, what your NAS is doing with that software, all coming back. So I think it's easy to say digital is digital, but it's not easy to say it because there's so much variability in how that digital got to wherever it's resting. Okay.
Yeah.
And then coming through. So I often hear, which is better, Tidal or Amazon HD or Qobuz or Spotify or whatever it is. And ultimately, it's going to be up to the user experience, because inherently through their software, there are going to be differences, whether or not they're lossless or whether or not they're bit for bit perfect, whatever it is, there's still variability. And I think that's what is very difficult. It's just like a turntable.
Yeah.
You can have a turntable, you can have different turntables with the same cartridge, right?
Yep.
They may sound different, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You may have, so there's, I think it's kind of going down that I don't think there is a best or this one sounds better. They just sound different. And if you peel back that onion, I think maybe you could say, well, this one sounds better for me.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I want to remain diplomatic in this conversation, but I want to get your take on something. Do you think, when it comes, like, I assume, I'm making an assumption, when you stream music from Qobuz, Tidal, whatever you have, do you maximize the resolution in the settings, or do you back it down, and limit it, or are you just give me the best that you got? How are you doing it?
Okay, so again, that's more complicated than you'd think it would be. All right. So different streaming platforms, and I'll use Tidal and Amazon Music HD as an example.
Yeah.
Within those platforms or software, you will have what's called exclusive mode.
Yes.
Exclusive mode is basically when it takes over. So if you have a 1644.1 track CD quality, and you look at your DAC and the DAC has a display, it'll read 1644 or 44.1. Okay. And then if you have a 24/192 track and it switches to that, then your DAC will say 192.
Yeah.
Some software, i.e. Amazon Music HD, does not have a true exclusive mode. So what happens is it doesn't actually change your resolution on your DAC. So what one has to do is go into their computer settings, go into the sound settings, device settings, advanced settings, and put the resolution at whatever you think the highest is going to be, whether it's 32,
whatever that native resolution is. Yeah.
But again, then you have another variability, because what that variability is now you have your computer upsampling the track to whatever you've set the DAC settings at. Tidal does it through their software, which is probably the best. It's not probably, it is the best way to do it. Okay. So for instance, when I have the iFi Zen DAC hooked up, which has MQA capabilities, and that's another conversation I have, right? MQA. So when I have Tidal in exclusive mode and a track comes on that's not master quality, let's just say hi-fi quality, there's a light that changes dependent upon the resolution of the track. Okay. There are plugins that you can put into your computer that can do that, but out of the box, a Windows machine, if it's using Amazon HD and is hooked up to a DAC, you're not going to change the resolution dependent upon the resolution of the track. There are ways to get around it, but for the layman, it's not going to be an easy thing to do.
I see. Do you think, you know what upsampling is, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a possibility that some of these companies are doing that, and what we think is high res is really just upsampled from a CD? What are your suspicions in this? Like, do you suspect that as a possibility, or would you say no, they're really giving us, the high resolution file?
I think the only answer to that question is how was that track mastered?
Yeah.
So if it was mastered at 24/192,
yeah.
But if it was mastered at 1644.1, or if it was mastered at 320 kilobits, like MP3 or whatever it is, then yeah, of course. I don't know. I do know, though, that if you look at the streaming libraries, okay,
Yeah.
less than 10% of the actual libraries are in a greater than CD quality format.
Yeah.
So greater than 1644.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with Tidal, their thing is the masters, right? That's the highest that you can get.
MQA, things like that. Sure. Yeah.
And you need MQA to basically
unpack
the masters. With all that said, every road leads back to how was that track mastered? Because if it wasn't mastered in that resolution, then it's nothing but software trickery to get it. And as in photography, okay, if you take a picture at, I don't know, let's say you take it at 20, what is it, pixels? 20, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Megapixels.
Megapixels. Yeah. Okay, so if you take a picture at 20 megapixels, you only have 20 megapixels worth of data.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it. Like, that's it. That's the threshold.
You can't create data from the abyss of nothingness, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I always love these like true crime saying where they're like, okay, there's a picture of the guy, enhance it, right? Enhance it.
And then it looks like just nothing. It looks like Minecraft.
Well, at some point, but even if it does look like something, that computer is making assumptions on what that pixel should look like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if something is upsampled beyond what it was mastered at or recorded at, then the computer is making assumptions about what that data should be. And in many cases, it may be stuff outside of the, less than 20 hertz or higher than 20,000 hertz or whatever it is. But if one is completely intent on hearing it exactly as it was mastered, then that's a thing that doesn't matter. Because you are extrapolating data that never existed to begin with.
Yeah.
With that said, there are some advantages to upsampling, but that generally has nothing to do with music quality and everything to do with hardware integration, to where a DAC is optimized to run at 192 or whatever it is. So that is on the hardware. That has nothing to do with the actual musical enjoyment.
I see what you mean. Interesting. Dude, it's such a these things fascinate me because you know what we need to do? I'll reach out to him, see if we can get David Solomon from Cobas on here to be a guest. And I want to ask him, like, how do they go about I want to understand, how do you even get the music? Like, what does that look like on your end? Like, how is that received? And then kind of like what you were saying earlier, like you get like a CD in the mail and you pop it in and then you rip it and you send it up into the Cobas servers. Like, how does this actually work? I would love to know that. It would be fascinating to chat with him about it. And I'm sure that he would be willing to do so. So I'll have to do that. Guys, we'll pause now. What has been your experience? Comments down below. What have you found in streaming, and what kind of nuggets do you have to share with the community to help us all out? I'd be curious.
Yeah. It's a fascinating thing to go down because with analog, you have all the variability of, well, let's take a record, for example.
Yeah.
Pressings, variability in the manufacturing process, variability in the person pulling it out of the mold or whatever it is.
Cutting the record. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Always variability. And you, out of anybody, would agree that different pressings sound differently. Okay.
Big time. Yeah.
So now you have the source material out of the box that can sound different. Mm-hmm. And then you put it on a turntable. All right. Mm-hmm. Now you have every variable inside that turntable, from the cartridge to the needle to how the plinth or whatever the heck it's called.
How the table is set up. Yeah.
Now you go into your RCA, you have your grounding. So all of those things are variables that can and will affect the sound.
Sure.
So I think there's some guy that wrote a book about speaker placement and acoustics and things like that. And there was something mentioned there called the circle of confusion. And with the
Mm.
circle of confusion, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's Floyd Tool. Yeah.
Yep, Floyd Tool. Okay, so the circle of confusion basically says, are we getting what was the intent of the artist? And the answer is we don't know, because the artist doesn't know what type of pressing was done. The artist doesn't know what type of cartridge or tape deck or CD player or the DAC or anything within that. So unless one was actually there at the recording and heard the way that it was recorded and how it was done. But again, now you have circle of confusion between this is what the sound engineer did, this is what the artist signed off for. Well, that's all running through their equipment, right?
Yeah.
So unless we have identical equipment, and oftentimes they're mastered in a way that they want it to sound the best to most people.
Yeah.
So they're making assumptions on what type of electronics, what type of products the listener has, right? So even if it sounds identical to what they heard, it may not sound good because they're taking into consideration and making assumptions on what is this going to be played through? How is this going to sound the best to most people?
Yeah.
So I always take it back to, if I'm listening to a live record from my favorite artist and I've been to one of their concerts, does it sound like it sounded at the concert? Because that is the only situation where almost all the variables can be eliminated, because they do sound checks. There's a sound board, and whoever that artist has hired is giving the audience what the artist has signed off for.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is the only way that we can truly hear what we think the artist intends, because that artist is saying, yes, that's how I want it to sound. And then you have to take that experience, and we have short memories when it comes to hearing. We have to take that experience and take it to our system and play a live record. And again, there's more variability, because that what we heard, unless we can hear a recording of the very concert we've been at, there's always going to be that difference. So our job, or what I feel like my job to do, is to get my system to sound as close as to what it sounded like when I was at that concert. And that concert may have been 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So how in the world can we ever dream of getting it just right?
Yeah.
We can't.
Yeah. 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 You're almost
I got up on, very passionate about all this.
You did. You did. Yeah, you're trying to recreate like an experience, right? I mean, human emotion is involved, and you're there, you're excited, and you're watching, your favorite band play and all of those things. How does that translate into sitting down and, music playback? When you were talking, I was thinking about something. Back when I used to, work a real job instead of this awesome job of just talking about audio all day, I would have a long commute, about 40 minutes, and I would listen to a lot of podcasts. And one of the podcasts is from now a friend of mine named Kendall, and shout out to Kendall. He's a producer, and he actually makes music, and he has a podcast. And I remember this conversation that I had with him after he started talking about, he did this like 3-series podcast, and it was epic, of literally, we're going to mix a demo, and I'm going to give you specific examples as we mix this demo that you're going to hear. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So you start with a mess, and then slowly he's like starting with the drums and then the vocals, and he's doing all of this stuff, studio trickery. And by the time you get to that 3rd episode and you realize how far you've come, because he plays, this is the final result. Now let's go back and play the original, what we started with. The biggest takeaway with what I learned from those episodes was, and I think this is a misunderstanding in the hi-fi community. When these guys are mixing and mastering, mostly mixing, they're not like, I want to move in the direction of more soundstage. That's what I'm after. It's actually fixing problem after problem after problem after issue. That sounds too bright. We need to lower this. We need to change the EQ on this. Oh, the drums are starting to breathe too much compression. We got to lower that. It's less about like this, oh boy, you know, the leading notes on this song are just, you know, no, it's like that's like way down the road. And I think that when I started talking to him about Soundstage, I kind of felt like I was an alien because he's like, what are
you talking about?
I feel like you're just making up words, Ron, you know? And when I started peeling back the layers of what I was saying, that performance in the room, it was fascinating to hear an actual guy that makes music. What he had to say, he said, I can only hope that's the end result of me fixing things. Like his job isn't to give you that, it's to eliminate problems. And then in the hopes that that's what you end up with. It was really cool. It was really cool.
Yeah, I think terms like soundstage and imaging that we throw around is, I just don't think it matters all that much to them, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy to think that, but I think you're right, Randy. I think that based on my conversation with him, he's like, that's not really my job. My job is to like fix problems that I'm more often hearing, this is a problem. I need to fix this. I need to tune this. It's just like little tiny subtle adjustments. And then the end result is, and he made this point. He's like, I got to think about the kid that's literally playing this on his iPhone in his hand. Cause that's all he has. And how does it, and when he's mixing down, he literally does that. He's like, what does it sound like on this? Or what does it sound like on an AM radio? You know, it's just like, or a mono source, you know, like a Bluetooth, you know, it's like,
what's going to sound the best to the most people?
To the most people. And if I ended up with a mix that Randy or Ron is listening to that is clearly separated and beautiful and has all the soundstage and, you know, unicorns jumping across our listening room, it's like, well, that's awesome. That's
why I don't listen to audiophile music.
Yeah.
I don't do it. You want to know why?
Why?
Because I don't think it matters. I think it matters to a fraction of a percentage point of the people that actually enjoy music. I think it matters to the people that want to show off the capabilities of their system.
Sure. Yeah.
To me, when I can get, or I can hear someone that has the experience of, I just listened to Shoot to Thrill by AC/DC, and it was the best I've ever heard it. That's what I want to do. That's what gets me excited. And soundstage, here's the really interesting part. You take a pair of $75 Sony SSCS5s, and if it was recorded to where the microphone was 20 feet away from, laterally, 20 feet away laterally from the singer or the instrument, whatever it was, when you play it back on those $75 speakers, guess what? It's going to sound like it's way over there.
Yeah.
Because soundstage and stuff like that has more to do with how it was recorded than it has to do with your actual system. And I had that experience one time. I was watching this YouTube video and it was at night and I had my headphones on. And the way that she was mic'd up was like, I don't think she did it on purpose, but it was just really bad. Like she didn't have the mic in front of her. I thought somebody was in the bathroom. Like, and I was like, what is going, and I turned around and that's when the light bulb went on for me. It's like, this has nothing to do with my system and everything to do with how it was recorded.
How it was recorded. Yeah. Yeah. I feel you, man. You know, when it comes to, you know, and I guess that we should try to, or maybe not define audiophile music. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
You know?
I made a broad statement with that.
It's okay though, because I think it's fair. And I think a lot of our listeners will know exactly what you're talking about. And don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's a lot of audiophiles out there that love Diana Krall and things like that. And that's great. Like, hey, if that's your cup of tea, awesome.
Baba O'Reilly.
Well, no, let's be careful there. Cause I'll start fighting.
I love that song. Don't get me. I love it.
It is the greatest.
Dude, all the stuff at the beginning.
I think that over the years,
I've tried, Las Vegas.
Dude, so good. I want to marry both. You know, if we can find like a some tracks that are really well recorded and stuff that I love to listen to, then I'm a happy camper. But I know what you're saying in that, are we just listening to something just to test our system and find out what it can do? And I do have some tracks that do exactly that. Like I do that.
MTV Unplugged series.
Yeah. It's like, it's like, let's play, what is his name? Mr. Valor introduced me to him. Yoshi
Hirohito or whatever, when he's writing across this stuff like that.
You play like Bubbles on your system. It's crazy. And it's just like, wow. But I only play it when I want to mess with people,
Yeah, so. It's cool. I went and listened to a pair of $10,000 B&W speakers.
Yeah.
And he was playing some track where there's ping pong balls bouncing all around, and
that's it. Bubbles. Yeah.
That's fine. That's cool.
It's fun.
You know what? It's fun.
It's what the kids are doing. The kids are doing it these days. They're listening to the ping pong song.
It's not for me.
I respect that about you, man. You are a true music enthusiast. When I say on my channel, music enthusiast, I'm thinking about you, because it's like, you want to hear, hey, can we play some Guns N' Roses? Can we play some AC/DC? Or can we binge listen to Pink Floyd all day because you love Pink Floyd so much?
It's not that I don't like them. They're just not for me. You want to hear something about my music enthusiasm?
Yeah.
Was on a live stream, and I can't remember if it was Sunday or Friday's live stream, but somebody mentioned 25 or 6 to 4 by Chicago.
Yeah.
And I played it on the drums for about 30 seconds, 25 seconds too long. And I just went through that song because I know that song. And it was, I know it. I played it. I played that song. So that's what I get excited about. I don't get excited about Bubbles and ping pong stuff. I get excited about Chicago. Now, with all that said, when you have a great system and you start to be able to experience, that's the thing for me. It's experiencing the music that I already know in a way that is new to me or extended to me, and more that music that everyone craps on, says, well, it's compressed and this, that, and the other. There's so much more in there. And if you can get out, you can get a good system and you can start to discover it more and more and more. That's where the joy for me comes in. Yeah. That's when the joy for my son, when he sits down, he said, that's the best I've ever heard Unforgiven by Metallica.
There you go.
I've never heard it better. And that's it.
Your work here is done. Yeah.
But I do not want to assign the music that will sound the best on my system, because at that point, I think it's about the system and not the music.
Yeah, sure. It's fair. That is a fair criticism of some of the traps that some of us audiophiles, and I consider myself an audiophile, I love gear, we can fall into this trap of, are you playing the same 5 songs over and over again that you don't even give a rip about? Or are you really finding joy? Like Randy always says, like, are you finding joy in what you're hearing and listening to? And it's taken me a while to like figure out a way to marry those two things, like find that balance of, hey, and that's why I say, like, if you're bored of your system, audiophiles, and I'll say it again, start listening to new music. Stop playing the same 5 damn songs that you've been playing. Stop playing Bubbles. Joshua Valor doesn't know what he's talking about, and move on.
But it's fun. So this is the cool part of the hobby, right?
Yeah.
So it all started because we like music. It all started because we wanted to hear the music. And the hunt is the fun part too.
It is. It's
the finding, and it's the marrying, and it's the integration of those things. That can be just as much as fun. And actually, for some people, it may be more enjoyable than actually listening to the music.
Yeah.
But my litmus test for when is it good is when I have an emotional experience, and to the point where I sometimes messed up when I'm hearing. And for me, and I was talking to my wife the other day about this. for me, music is my, how do I say it? My meditation.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound crazy to some people, and I don't really care. I feel closer to God or our creator or whatever you want to assign it to when I am listening to music and it is eliciting in me an emotional response, because everything goes away and I'm there and the music is there. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm not worried about music, or I'm not worried about work. I'm not worried about the kids or whatever it is, trimming the bushes. It is the only time in my life that I am able to be absolutely 100% present without concentrating on anything else, and just experiencing what an artist created.
Yeah.
And that is my happy place.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, man.
What do you think about that, Ron?
Are you a fan of CCR, Creedence Clearwater?
Oh, yeah. Down on the corner.
Everybody loves that song. Yeah. So,
every Vietnam movie ever has that song.
Or they did it wrong.
Yeah.
They did it wrong. They screwed up the movie. I remember in something close to what you were just saying, an early memory in junior high when you don't know what the hell you're doing and life is just confusing and insane. And I would come home for lunch because our house was just across the street from the school. And I think that it was one of those situations where little Ronnie Bernay got his heart broken by a girl or something, and I came home. It happens. And I had a little plastic turntable, and I had my CCR record. And I remember playing As Long as I Can See the Light. I don't know if you're familiar with that particular song. Dude, it's one of those like ingrained moments, similar to what you're saying, where everything is okay. It's like, it's like the best reset button in life. And to this day, I feel that way, whether I've had an argument with Sarah because she's crazy and she's wrong and clearly wrong. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, it's not going to work out well later when she hears this. Or, life has you down and you've been kicked around and you're just down in the dumps. It's the greatest reset button that I know of that same experience that happens over again, where you feel connected to something bigger than you. And you're like, it's going to be okay. I got this.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but that
you did a good job. Yeah.
It's special for me, and it always has been. And I don't know, man. I used to listen to records or CDs, tapes, just have my little system, and it's always been something special for me. And I would argue that it's more ingrained in everybody than they think. And I think I've said it before, try to watch a movie that doesn't have a soundtrack.
Yeah.
It elicits emotions in us that most people aren't even aware of. And it's imprinted on us in a fashion, in a sense that most people aren't aware of. And it imprints on us in our early teenage years, 13, 14. And the music that we listen to is at that point in our life is pivotal, right? It imprints on us. And that's why I listen to a lot of Metallica, a lot of grunge, a lot of stuff from, when I was 14, 13. And it's not saying I don't discover new stuff and I love it.
Yeah.
But whether or not anybody wants to admit it, that is the music that moves them.
Yeah.
And you can be moved later in life, but it's just imprinted on us.
I feel you, buddy. The old MTV Unplugged album on cassette, man. We wore that thing out driving in the Nissan Sentra. We wore that tape out, dude.
Yeah, Two Life Crew.
Oh, yeah. We did Two Life Crew as well. We did that one.
I had to hide that cassette from my mom.
I'm serious. We did. We had to hide it from mom. I mean, that would not go well if she knew what we were listening to. So, yeah, we did a little Two Life Crew every now and then when we were feeling
so
frisky.
Ridiculous.
So ridiculous. All right, buddy. What a great show. This was a lot of fun. Guys, thanks for joining us. What has been your experience with streamers? Let us know in the comment section down below. If your life was a soundtrack, what would the soundtrack be? Let us know in the comment section down below.
And what music moves you?
What music moves you? That's what I want to know. Yeah.
Good stuff, Ron.
Buddy. All right, guys. Podcast is available on all the platforms. Comments, links down below, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.